Deborah Kerr of Caledonia is one of 7 candidates for the office of State Superintendent of Public Instruction. The primary is February 16th. The general election is April 6th. Deborah, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you very much.
Well, time is limited. I know you're busy, and I've got a long list of questions, but take a minute and give us your elevator speech and why you're the most qualified to be State Superintendent, please. I'm counting. Okay.
Okay, here we go. I've dedicated the last 40 years of my life to education. I've worked in all sectors of education. I'm parochial educated. I've taught in the private school. I've created a 4K charter school, and I've dedicated the last 34 years of my life to public education. I'm an award-winning teacher, principal, high school athletic director, successful basketball coach, and I've also worked in rural schools as well as suburban schools. I have been elected presidential leadership at the Milwaukee Rotary, our state superintendent's organization as president, and our national state superintendent's association. And so I have great relationships with people on both sides of the aisle. I have advocated for kids for the last 5 years at Congress and at the state capitol, and I have gotten teacher licensing laws changed and implemented to put more teachers into the pipeline. And I've got the energy and passion to do it. And if you need more information, kerforkids.com will tell my whole story. But I've also the only candidate who has closed achievement gaps, raised graduation rates for kids of color, and won state and national awards of character.
Okay, well done. Okay.
All right.
My turn. Questions.
Okay.
The impact of the pandemic on our K12 schools. What's been the biggest, most significant damage to our K12 schools? What's your vision for our K12 schools post-pandemic, please, ma'am?
This pandemic has exacerbated all of the inequities that we've known existed for a long time. And so we need to address the extensive learning loss of all of our kids. All of our kids are not winning right now in Wisconsin, Steve. And we've got to come together as communities to make sure that all of our kids are served and served well. That means equitable technology, robust internet, food insecurity issues have to be dealt with. But now we got to get back to face-to-face instruction. I am the only candidate that's come out with a statewide plan to do so. Our administrators and our leaders are ready to do that. Our teachers want to come back and see our kids. Our parents have been heroic in dealing with this virtual learning and their abilities to support us. And so it's now time to get back to business and get back to putting our kids back on track to achieve excellence in all that they do.
Should there be a statewide standard for when schools are online or in person in light of COVID? Because right now that's on a school board by school board basis.
I support local control, working hand in hand with our health department. The problem we've had in Wisconsin, there's just been a lack of meaningful leadership at all levels. And so school superintendents and district leaders and school boards have had to shoulder this burden of the pandemic. And so we know that we've got schools that are open all across the state because the science of the data shows that it's safe to do so. But our concern is right now is this risk is always going to be with us until this vaccine is further given to all people. But we just have to figure out how can we lower the risk and mitigate the risk of this disease so that it's safe for all people to come back to school. And maybe that's in smaller groups. I propose that all of our elementaries come back as soon as possible. Those kids need us, and their social emotional development needs are critical at this time.
Well, I want to ask you about something that I think is going to be debated on the floor of both the Senate and the Assembly this week. It's a provision that says that 2/3 of a local school board must vote to continue only online every 14 days. What's your position on that proposal that I expect to be debated in the Capitol this week?
Well, I'm hoping that everyone understands that local school boards have the right to make those decisions. And I think it's based upon their community, the parents, what they want to do. And so right now, I know that our parents have indicated that most of them want to come back. Having school boards have to come and meet every couple of weeks, I think would be very difficult, especially for, these are volunteer positions in our communities. And so I'm not sure that provision could be implemented with fidelity, but I do understand the thought of trying to get our kids back to school.
I want to ask you about a amendment that was debated on the floor of the state Senate, I think within the last 10 days. It said that in light of the pandemic, school test scores should not be made public until the pandemic is over. What's your position on that, please?
Assessment data is critical for us to understand where our kids are now and where we need to go with them into the future. The problem with the publication of those standardized tests, we don't get them in time to make any decisions that are thoughtful and meaningful. And so I know our teachers want to test our kids. The research is showing that some of our kids are more than a year behind. We've got to deal with this achievement gap now and start today.
Let's go right into the achievement gap. You and I know it's worse in some of our urban cities. Your recommendations to close that achievement gap, especially since you just said it's getting worse as a result of the pandemic, please.
We're first going to start, when I'm elected, with a reading roadmap that's going to be pre-K through third grade. We need to have alignment of evidence-based practices and assessments to mark our kids' proficiency and growth in reading. Right now, we have over 400 different ways of teaching reading in the state of Wisconsin. We have to focus on literacy. As we all know, that's the gateway to a successful future. And I think if we align those practices with the metrics that really matter and make sure our teachers have high quality staff development and our principals have the support to implement it, we can start to see growth right away. The biggest 5 districts across the state have the largest minority populations. I think that we work collectively with them, we can start to see improvement in growth within 1 year.
What has the pandemic done in terms of the needs, the mental health needs of our K12 students, please?
Our kids have experienced a lot of trauma through this pandemic, and I think it's going to be very crucial as much as our heroic teachers have tried to connect with our kids online and nurture those relationships. We know that we have to address those right away. And so until we address the mental health needs and the social emotional needs of our kids, they're not going to learn well. And so I know that many schools across the state of Wisconsin have already put great programs in place. They're partnering with their local clinicians and therapists to make sure our kids and families have what they need. We're going to have these partnerships moving forward more than we ever have in the past to make sure the needs of our kids and parents are being served well. And let's not forget our teachers too.
Fiscal Bureau documents show that choice is now a $750 million item in the state budget. Your position on choice, should it be further expanded? Should it be held where it is, or should it be dialed back, please?
Let's talk about this for a second, because I really think it's important. This has been legislated through law. The state superintendent does not have the authority to make any changes on this, but what I want to do is I want to bring all the stakeholders to the table. Nobody has ever done that. I want one system of accountability and full transparency and equitable access. So what is that going to look like? So I want to work with all the stakeholders to accomplish just that. As my job as the state superintendent, and a lot of people don't know this, I'm in charge of all these schools. It's within my purview to oversee and support these children. And so if we are going to truly be equitable in what we do, we have to serve all kids and be concerned about the welfare of all kids. And so I want to work together and move our state forward to create a world-class education system. And I can't do that with only serving half the kids.
Please talk to me about your feelings on the issues, the unique needs of rural schools, please.
I have walked a mile in the shoes of our rural educators, and I know they're some of the most creative and innovative leaders across the state. But there are challenges also parallel and mirror some of the urban challenges with mental health, with poverty, with lack of robust internet, and the inability to hire qualified teachers. I want to work with our rural leaders and the Rural School Alliance to make changes and differences, perhaps looking at how we can get more teachers into the pipeline by paying those rural teachers a higher salary. But their support and their needs are just as important as the kids in the urban settings.
The revenue limits that school districts have been living with for more than 20 years. Is it time to get rid of those limits that have protected property taxes?
Well, I think what's important to realize is those funding formulas have been put in place to recognize equity and social justice. However, Remember when those formulas were first started, we only had to serve one sector of education, and that was public schools. I think it's time for us to bring some people together, business partners included, and the DPI and the people who do the state finance every day to take a look. Could we do a CPI increase every year to stay current? Because all of our bills at the local level have continued to escalate. But when those revenue limits don't allow us flexibility, it requires us to make cuts in programs that are essential to a comprehensive education.
Do we need to go back to 2/3 states funding of our K12 schools, Deborah?
Absolutely. I think we know that if we can invest the money in the right places, we're going to get better outcomes. But we're going to have to restore and renew our relationships with the educators and the legislature to make sure we're putting our money in the right places. So one thing I want to do is make sure that the DPI is spending their money in an equitable fashion. And I want to conduct an equity audit that would allow us to look at that. One of my wonderings is we don't get a lot of federal money, and I know we have a lot of needs. So I want to take a look at that right away.
Here's a theoretical. If you were teaching a class on what happened at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, how would you do it?
This has been a part of our democracy in that people can come together and have a voice. However, there's a way to do it respectfully and making sure people understand who you are. I think it was important for kids to have this conversation because our kids need a voice in education. And so I believe there's a way to help our students understand that, our democracy allows us to have a voice and choices in America. And so I want to work with kids to say, you know what? These are the issues that happen. We have to understand the why and what are some of those root causes and what would you do differently? And I think we need to ask our kids to be part of this conversation moving forward.
Okay. I went to your website. You've highlighted a number of issues. I just want to give you a chance. Is there any one issue that is central to your campaign that I haven't asked about yet? Please.
I believe we need to connect the dots with our businesses and industries in Wisconsin to create strength-based pathways. Right now, we know we have shortages in many sectors. That includes the trades, the teachers, IT, agriculture, healthcare. We need to connect the dots and create the opportunities for our kids to understand the great career opportunities out there for all of our kids. And I think it needs to start in elementary school. And so I would like to work with all of those stakeholders to make sure our kids have career and college and other aspirations taught to them all throughout their educational process. They need to see people who look like them doing these great jobs. And we can no longer just promote college or career. It's college and career and military. And so my campaign has a promise, our Wisconsin promise. We will promise to know every child by name, passion, strength, and need, ready to go into a future that they choose.
Thank you. Deborah Kerr of Caledonia is one of 7 candidates for the office of State Superintendent of Public Instruction. The primary is February 16th, the general election, April 6th. Deborah, thank you so much for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you very much, Steve. Have a good day on Wisconsin.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.